Welcome to the National Council for Hypnotherapy podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of hypnosis, lifting the lid on hypnotherapy, sharing insights and tips for change as we chat. So sit back, relax, and enjoy all the wonderful possibilities of hypnotherapy. My name is Tracey Grist, and I will be your host today. I'm here today with Charron Pugsley Hill, and you're an environmentalist, activist, artist, and hypnotherapist.
Yes, I am.
Brilliant. That's a lot of hats to wear.
It is, but they all fit together really well, actually. So, I worked in 20 years in wildlife conservation. A lot of that work was about people and nature. So it was about the benefits, to people for nature and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of that work was really about making people feel better, working with drug addicts, people, who needed to be out in the countryside and, just looking at all those benefits of nature. So I started that sort of people well-being sort of journey many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about topics I get involved with, so hence the sort of activist bit. I don't sit at home, if there's something that I can make a difference to.
Yeah.
And then I took voluntary redundancy, found art because I was rubbish as a child. I was told as a teacher, don't bother being an artist, you're rubbish.
Oh.
Yes, I know, but that happens to so many people. As an artist, when you talk to people, they go, oh yeah, my teacher said I was rubbish, so I gave it up. That's what happened to me, so I get that, I understand that. And then, found solution-focused hypnotherapy, having had it myself.
Okay, I was going to ask what led you on the hypnotherapy journey.
Yes, it was a bit of a traumatic time for myself. So my 15-year-old niece took her own life following cyberbullying. This was 12 years ago. She was actually a very high-profile case in Ireland. There's a very big sort of investigation into it and all sorts of stuff. And it was almost at the time that Ireland said enough of our young people doing this, because she wasn't the first. She's not going to be the last. We know that. And I ended up doing lots of sort of publicity, talking to the media all over the world about cyberbullying, because it was a really big issue at that point. It sort of came to a head. And I was somebody who could talk about it because I'd been used to talking about all sorts of, complicated nature issues and environmental issues. So I seemed to be talking about it a lot. And it just sort of hit me, actually. And I hit rock bottom, very depressed. Had a number of other sort of smaller things happen at the same time, which sort of compound it. And often that's what happens, isn't it? To get yourself to a really poor place in your mental health, that it's a number of things just hit you all at once and you just can't deal with them because you're not in a place to deal with the next thing. I'm not saying, my niece's death would have been a smaller thing, because of course it's not. That would have floored anybody. But, the things that happened afterwards, if there'd been a one-off, I would have dealt with them very differently, but because I was in a bad place, So I went to the NHS, and the NHS said, yeah, if you've got PTSD, probably 3 to 5 years before we can do anything for you. Have some antidepressants. And I went, I don't need antidepressants. I need to deal with this now, because I was very worried about the state of my mental health. And a friend of mine recommended me to a solution-focused hypnotherapy therapist. And the next day I found myself sitting in front of him, having what we call as an initial consultation, where I was talking to him. And the first thing he said to me, which was absolutely game-changing for me, was, I don't need to know what's happened to you to enable you to move forward. If you want to tell me and we work together and it comes out, that's fine, but I don't need to know. And because I'd been spending so much time talking about this terrible thing that had happened to my niece, I was like, oh, I'm so relieved I don't have to talk about this anymore, but you can still help me. And 6 sessions later, I was really back in control of myself. I had 10 sessions at that point, just to make sure that I was really, back into who I was. And it was incredible, the change in such a short space of time. It was amazing. I was amazed. I'd had things in the past, I was much younger. I'd had counselling. Not really my thing, to be honest. I didn't really feel like it really moved me forward. And I've always been somebody to move forward rather than sort of really look at what's happened in the past.
Yeah. So it was a nice fit then to look, because I suppose it's your activist self, isn't it? That wanting to move forward, go ahead and do
Change things. Yeah,
stuff.
really change things. Yeah, yeah. So it really did fit with me. And then it was years later that, I was doing all sorts of things and everything else. And it was just one day, I think I was away on holiday, and I was chilling. I'm not very good at chilling out. But I was just thinking, oh, that was so amazing. And I'd got a friend at the time who was in a really poor place, and I recommended a guy to her, and I thought, do you know what? There's no reason why you shouldn't train to do this yourself.
Ah, yeah.
I decided to train myself. And so I went to the Clifton practice of solution focused hypnotherapy and trained with them and never looked back, to be honest. It's been amazing. It's been totally life-changing for me. And I know for clients that, obviously I work with, because, you've seen it as well, how amazing, the work is that we do with people who come to us in a really bad place.
Yeah. I love the transformative process.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like seeing the change in people,
Yeah.
and I'm sure likewise it feels different. It's a different way of working, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're giving people tools, aren't you, for the future? That's what I felt. Those years before I decided to train, I felt like I'd got tools. If I was going to slip back, I felt like I really knew what I needed to do to get myself out of anything when I slipped back. Because let's face it, life throws challenges at us all the time. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Absolutely not. Last autumn I had a bit of a slip back into the PTSD that I had, but I knew what I needed to do. So I'm out of it, and it was about focusing on all those good things, moving forward. What can I do to make myself feel better? And I'm completely out of it again, and to be honest, it was, it was an amazing thing to go back into it because it reminded me, why I trained, why I'd done that, the tools I'd got to do it, to get myself out of it. And yeah, and I went back to therapist as well for a few sessions just to really get myself back on track.
Yeah.
There's
And
no,
I I think that's what I like is that like all my clients know that they can touch base because sometimes life is harder than the other, a bit like moon cycles and water and tides and like life is organic in that way and we're not just like, oh, I'm finished now. I've done therapy. I'm perfect. No.
yeah.
No.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because people think as therapists, you should be perfect and you shouldn't have to go and have therapy and all that sort of stuff. And, okay, I have a bit of sympathy with that, I think. But actually, we are people too. We're human. We have all those challenges thrown at us that everybody else has. So for me, it just felt like a natural thing to do to go, okay, yeah, I've got a flare up of my PTSD. And I know exactly what caused the flare up of the PTSD. It was two clients in the same week who were actively suicidal, and they were the first ones I'd had, believe it or not. I've been doing this for years, but it was the first two in a week that'd been actively suicidal. And I knew that would be a trigger, with my niece. I'd always said that it's going to be a trigger. And it actually was. And maybe I was sort of pushing myself towards it being a trigger, but actually, I got them out of being actively suicidal, and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it was interesting, picking up on my triggers, because obviously we look at that with clients, don't we? So, yeah, yeah. So for me, I feel it's a strong thing to sit here and go, I'm not perfect. I had a flare up. I dealt with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what did you do? So if somebody's listening who like what would be tips that you could give? Tips is a bit disrespectful, but what techniques could you offer to somebody listening who could just do with a little bit of help, really?
I think one of the biggest tips, and I think things have really been changing over the last few years, isn't it, is to prioritize our mental health. It's never really been seen as a big priority. I think things are getting better in that sort of area, aren't they?
Mm.
So I think firstly, it's that about prioritizing mental health. And there are lots of things that we can do to do that. So the first thing is, doing things that enable us not to get so depressed or whatever it is in the first place, because then it makes life easier, doesn't it? If you're not hitting that rock bottom, which I mean, most of us are going to probably hit rock bottom at some point in our lives. So I suppose there are various questions that, I asked myself at the time, right? Okay, so what's going to make things better for me right now? What can I do that's going to make me feel good? So it was about focusing on those real things that actually made me feel better. So you've just met my new puppy. That's part of the process, was getting a new dog. And, so for me, I don't feel like I'm a whole person unless I've got a dog. I've always had a dog whole life.
Yeah.
So there's that little dog-shaped hole in your heart when they're not here, isn't there? So my dog also, 14 and a half years, died in the autumn. So that was another part of all the whole process. And she was my absolute soul dog. So getting a dog was another thing. It was getting myself fitter, making sure I was out swimming, doing all those sort of things that make me feel better. I love swimming. We've got a beautiful Lido in Peterborough. It's
Ah,
so cold water swimming. So I was swimming up until December. Oh no, brilliant. Because it really does. There is something about swimming outside. We were talking earlier. I'm not going to swim in the sea and the river at the moment because of water pollution. But the Lido in Peterborough is an amazing place. You can see red kites flying overhead, which I
yeah,
was involved with the reintroduction of those when I was working in nature conservation. We could see the cathedral. You can sometimes hear the bells, the trees, seeing the changes in nature, through the seasons. All those sort of things really, just keep you in a better place, get you back to a better place. But for me, it's very much about, what little actions can I take every day, which are positive, but then
yeah,
they have that knock-on effect.
yeah,
So just doing, I mean, I suppose Michael Mosley, is very much in our hearts, isn't it, at the moment, that do one thing. In solution focused hypnotherapy, we use the miracle question, which is about what small thing can you do, to change and make you feel better. And it's only about a small step because when you're in a bad place, you can't take a massive step. You just can't.
mm,
It's about those small little tiny steps. So what can we do? I could have a coffee with a friend and have a chat.
mm, yeah,
Nice. I could go for a walk. I could listen to some music that I love. And all those little things are changing that chemistry in our brains, getting those neurotransmitters moving in our brains, changing those neural pathways. So, there are lots of little things. And I guess another top tip is see a hypnotherapist because it's a really positive short-term thing that really can change lives.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? I think I re- I like seeing that people are making more effort around mental health well-being and making that investment. And you see people, like both of my sons are attending the gym and they go twice a week, and it's like, well, what's your mental support? What are you doing to look after your mental well-being? And I wish people would see therapy like going to the gym, that we just need a few tweaks now and again and dip in and out and look after ourselves. So yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah, I think I've got clients who do come once a month, just to keep themselves on track. That's how they put it. Just to keep on track, just to check in and make sure, that they're just doing what they need to do. And I love those sessions actually. They're some of my favorite ones because they're not mentally, they've not had big issues, but
yeah,
it's them committing to themselves.
yeah.
They want to feel well. They want to do all those lovely things that they couldn't do when they were unwell.
Mm.
And I love those sessions. I have to say they're probably some of my favorite ones, not strictly necessary for most people at all, as you probably know, most of my clients don't do that, but it tends to be the older clients actually that tend to do that, which is interesting.
Well, I also think sometimes, and I don't know whether you have the same in Peterborough. I don't know if it's a city centric. I don't, that some of my clients just need the permission to look after themselves.
Yeah.
They're not there yet going, okay, I can like execute self-care without guilt. But actually, some of the work is about me going, no, take that time off or look after yourself, or, that caring part that clients are learning the self-care and learning the priority of.
I think it is a learning process, isn't it? Because I know when I was younger, I mean, the sort of atmosphere around it was very different then as well. But, you sort of burn out, don't you, when you're young? You sort of, go on holiday and the first couple of days you're completely wiped out. I don't do that anymore, because, I know about all sorts of things and pacing and, all sorts of things that we know how important it is to keep ourselves in a good place so that we can actually really enjoy all of our life rather than going bust, boom, bust, boom, bust, boom. So yeah, I think it is really good, isn't it? And that permission, I think, is really important for people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you paint as well and create. Is there any crossover with the creativity in the hypnotherapy?
Yeah,
How? Integrate.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So, I've done many workshops over the years in terms of painting, and I've always called them confidence with your creativity. So one of my sort of particular interests is in women actually who aren't reaching their potential. So, we see so many, women who are looking after everybody else, and then suddenly they go, "Oh, where's me? Who am I? What am I going to do?" I love that moment when they go, "Oh, how can I find myself?" But the workshops, so they were confidence creativity. So they weren't people copying what I was doing. It was all about people coming to that, thinking about, where they were in their place and everything else, and them creating their own painting. Obviously with help, guidance, support, encouragement, enthusiasm, all that sort of stuff. And it was never about the end process. It was always about spending time with other people, doing the same thing, talking, usually women, actually, because I tend to sort of attract more women to the work I do. And it was really interesting, because obviously that sort of workshop is much harder for you as an artist. You've got 10 different people doing 10 different things, going, what, how do I, but I loved it because seeing the process, going through, just enjoying a day. Because when you're painting, you go into flow. That's a phrase that most artists will recognize, which is a state of sort of trance, really.
Yeah.
So you're in that place where your brain is shut off that crazy part of the world. It's just focusing on what you're doing. It's giving your brain time, to think up solutions you might need, just to have a bit of reflection, a bit of peace,
Yeah.
of healing time, so there's massive overlaps between the two. And that is something that I'm looking at sort of taking forward, actually, in the work as I go forward, using nature more, doing perhaps therapy walks and things like that. But also, continuing the work that I've done, in art and art. I'd love to do some little retreats actually. We're looking at moving, so I want a nice, lovely studio where I can do some retreats, for people for 2 or 3 days just to come do some therapy as well. So learn about how the brain works, but
Yeah.
also do some art and do some walks and just, thoroughly just have a time out for themselves to think about where they're going. Because I think that's something that I would have perhaps appreciated at some point. Yeah, so I think that's where it's going. Because my two sort of main interests are sort of in chronic illness, supporting people with chronic illness, because I had quite a lot of chronic illness, through COVID. So I guess that's where I've just gone because I'm not somebody who hides all that sort of stuff. I was very clear about how, hypnotherapy helped me through all that. But, to sort of take all that all the way through, so I tend to attract people, who've got chronic illnesses, but also, as I say, women who want to sort of just find themselves again. And I love that part of my work because I think there's a lot of women out there who are just doing what they feel they should be doing and not what they really want to be doing.
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because we're at that point where we're told, the patriarchal society and women can do and be everything and we can't. Something always gives, and I think the the woman gives, and that's they're constantly working or childcare or house care, all of those things that we just have so many demands on us that space to find oneself is really, really important.
Yeah, I think it is. And there comes that point, doesn't it? I think, and as well, it seems to be women at a certain point, they've, the children are just leaving home, they've done all the work and they're doing, and then there's like this new phase of life.
Yeah,
It's scary. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the point I love because actually you take away that sort of fear and actually give people that enthusiasm, that encouragement for a new phase of their lives, showing that they can be happy, they can do lovely things. It's not all over.
Well, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because if you've done all of those years caring, bringing up children, holding the family home or working, like there's so much structure around you that you're held or trapped or supported, however we look at that, and then suddenly the kids go and all of your primary like needs of demands have been met, and then suddenly they're all gone, and you're like, oh, who am I? What's for me now? And I think that can be as daunting as it is exciting. Yeah.
Very. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely agree. And yeah, and I love that. I love working with women who then, you can see them, going on to write a book or do whatever it is. because they've had it in them. They just didn't, again, that's that permission thing, I think, as well, isn't it? Part of that permission thing is, yes, it's okay to write a book, and just it's okay to go and do that bungee jump. It's okay to do whatever it is that you're going to do. And I love watching that. I love watching that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing when you're caring for people, like your needs come last. So then you think, well, I can't possibly write a book or I can't possibly paint a painting, because who am I to want to do those things? Well, you've just got as much right as anyone else has.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And that's the beauty of hypnotherapy, isn't it? Because it can change those sort of neural pathways and enable you to see, the possibilities, that positivity, that new life. You don't have to look at what's happened before. You can just move on and
Yeah.
just focus on, the new part of your life. I love it. I love watching that.
Yeah, yeah. So who do you read around hypnotherapy? Are you inspired by anyone in the hypnotherapy world?
Yeah, I do actually. I do. Yeah, I do read and I do listen to podcasts a lot.
Sorry, that wasn't a do you read?
No, no, I just answered how I made you feel. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I mean, I read a lot of historical sort of fiction actually. And that's my sort of, chick lit stuff.
Yeah,
I, that's my sort of, I need to just, decompress.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? I've always been a reader. I've always been somebody. So one of my sort of, favorite phrases, which a friend gave me many years ago, is "Every day's a learning day."
Ah,
Every day's,
yeah,
you know, because I think it's important, to learn through life. Too many people, I think, done that. I'm just going to stay the same. I'm not going to learn. Yeah, and I think, I'll show you a book I've just literally sort of finished reading a little while ago, which is Johan Hari. I don't know if you've read this one.
oh, okay, yeah,
Focus. So he goes on a journey to sort of find out why, people can't focus on things anymore. Because people blame themselves, don't they, about, oh, I can't focus on this, I can't do this. Actually, there are so many outside influences taking that focus away from what we're doing. Fast, fascinating book, excuse me. Fascinating book, actually, why we can't pay attention. Well, actually, there's lots of, external influences pulling us away from everything we're doing. Not just social media, there's lots of other things as well. So fascinating books, that's really good. So he's got another one actually, which I'm going to get and read that as well. Because he writes in a really sort of easy to read way. Because often, books about the brain and hypnotherapy, I'm sorry, I did enough science years and years ago. They're very dry and I just can't. I just can't. Um, no, no, I just can't. I just can't. Yeah. But I try. I do try, but I must admit I prefer books like him that's just a little bit softer,
yeah,
actually. Yeah, because you do take in a lot of things and it really enhances the way you think about your own work.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It's difficult, isn't it? Because we're so like bombarded with advertising, we're so bombarded by lights, by our phone, by all of the screens in life that well, I've just come back from holiday and it took me about 4 days to actually read a book again because I've been so used to scrolling or, emails and reading information that to actually just sit down with ink on paper was just a big ask. But and then eventually I got back into it and I thought, oh, note to self, mm, what have you been missing out on?
Very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And we don't realise, do we? We just sort of get sucked in.
No.
Yeah.
And it's that different. So I will read non-fiction, but because I was like, oh, I'm going to go and read a fiction book, my brain was going, pulling it back in. Come on, let's focus on fiction. And you realize, okay, so how long has that been happening for? And it's such a slow process where you realize, oh, actually, most of my evening's taken up by coming in and out of Instagram or just checking in on social media, and it's not actually reading. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very easy to get sucked in.
yeah, and our brains get agitated.
Yeah, absolutely. They do.
Yeah.
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 And of course, then that can be, overcome by, walking in nature. My friend said to me years ago, she said, "Why don't you listen to music when you're out walking?" I'm like, "Because I want to listen to the sounds of nature. I want to take nature in. I don't want to listen to somebody sort of like going."
Yeah.
The one time I did enjoy listening to music actually was after I had major heart surgery just after lockdown. And that was the one time that music really helped me, was the rhythm, because I had to walk. So it really, really did help me then. And I think there was something about the rhythm giving my brain this sort of space to actually really focus on the walking. That makes sense?
Mhm.
It does, but
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because when I'm painting, I don't listen to music either. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
there's no point because I'm not listening to it. So there's no point because my brain is in that trance state, which is lovely. So
Yeah.
for music around me to, yeah, because I'm just off, in my trance state, which is lovely. So
And
yeah.
it's that thing, isn't it, with hypnosis, that people being frightened of like being put in a trance. And actually, we go into so many trance states all the time.
Yes, people don't really understand that, do they? Yeah,
Yeah.
I find it a very beautiful place, and actually, it's hypnotherapy and hypnosis has actually saved my life. I think on two occasions. One was my major heart surgery, and then I was home for a few days and had a massive pulmonary embolism, so blood clot in the lungs, which I shouldn't have survived. And I think because I was so calm, so I sort of self-hypnotized myself again with that. The oxygen need didn't go up. So I
Oh,
think I honestly credit it with saving my life because the consultants have no idea how I actually survived that.
wow.
So that to me said to me how powerful again this therapy is. And then I had breast cancer. I mean, honestly, you can't make up my health issue over the last few years. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I had to have a lumpectomy. And I did that under self-hypnosis with just local anaesthetic. I
Oh,
had a surgeon who was prepared to do it rather than put me out. He was prepared to do it, and it was amazing because I was laughing and joking with all the staff in the operating theatre as he was cutting me open, and I could help him. I could move because I was awake, and I'd put myself in and out of trance, while the surgery was going on. It's not for everybody. I'm going to admit that's not for everybody. It's because I am experienced. You're
yeah.
not going to get that with few sessions of hypnotherapy if you come as a client. But to me, it was amazing, and I think it amazed the staff in the theatre that I was, as I say, I was laughing and joking because the surgery had been delayed because somebody else's surgery had been, taken longer. I was starving. I was, laughing and joking about, "Can we get a pizza? I'm so hungry." But they were finding it really funny, So yeah, so I think it's an incredibly powerful tool if you can have it in your toolbox, to help you through that. And of course, because I wasn't put out and because I took control and it
Yeah.
was me being in my power, I recovered so much better.
Yeah. What made you take that option, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't I don't do very well with general anesthetics.
Yeah.
And I just knew I could do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just thought, because so when it was diagnosed, I was at the NHS and they basically said, well, this is what's going to happen. Bang, 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 bang. And it felt like a complete hamster wheel. It was like no control, nothing. And I'd had a stroke before that. I'd had the pulmonary embolism. I'd had lots of infections. I'd had the major, major heart surgery. The surgeon's words, not mine. So I felt like I was in a bit of a sort of process anyway.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no. So, I spoke to another surgeon and he said, yeah, okay, we can look at that. And had a very different attitude to it, which was great. And yeah, it just all worked perfectly well and fine for me. I'm not saying, as I say, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I did feel very strong and very powerful. And as I say, I knew I could do it. Having been through all the other stuff, this was almost like a ticking off exercise.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a real powerful thing for me as a person to do that.
Well, and I think one of my earlier experiences was my second child. So with Elliot, my first, I'd had an epidural, so I didn't really have any awareness of what it was like going into labour. So with Aidan, I I was told I was having a big baby and that I needed to go to the hospital. La 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 la, and because he was my second child, they expected me to know what labour was, and I didn't have a clue because I was epiduraled up, and So I was saying to my husband at the time, I think I'm in labour. I don't know. Like, and so I'd be phoning the hospital going, I think I'm in labour. And the midwife in the end would be like, no, no, you don't sound like you're in labour. Okay. And I'd be sort of saying to myself, well, I've grown up being told that I'll, fall over a 2p piece and cry. So I'm really sensitive. So this probably isn't labour. I'm probably being dramatic and thinking it's labour, but it isn't labour. It's not really like hardcore labour because I don't know. And so all the time, I'd literally persuaded myself that I wasn't going through labour. So by the time I got to hospital, I was crowning with Aidan and like on the last legs because I'd just been, and that how we talk to ourselves and how we, I was like, oh, I'm just so sensitive. This isn't real labour. And I think the power of how we talk to ourselves, what we say to ourselves.
Absolutely is huge. And I don't think people realize, do they? I talk a lot to my clients actually about turning round. They're saying these things in session, and I'm saying, right, let's turn that round.
Yeah.
How can we put that in a better way? Because, it's a habit, isn't it, to talk to ourselves, particularly as women, put ourselves down, and if we can turn that round, we're going to be much more powerful beings. Much
Yeah. And why not?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Yeah. So do you think you were sort of using your own sort of hypnotherapy then, during that sort of labor process? Because I didn't know hypnotherapy when I had my children. That was, before my hypnotherapy journey. So
No, yeah, and I definitely was using a form of hypnosis. Like, granted, it was clumsy, but all the time because I was telling myself. So the process was quite straightforward, really. And Aidan could have come sooner, I think. So I probably delayed the labour just by not recognizing the readiness of it. I just didn't know. Just
yeah.
didn't know.
No,
Yeah.
and of course we now know, that hypnosis is used a lot, for birth and pregnancy, in a very successful way, isn't it? So yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. So yeah.
And I think that learning, like when we're in those situations, like realizing our own strengths, I think is really important. And that permission to talk really well about yourself, to be your own like PR. Like,
Yeah.
why not? It's in our heads. Nobody knows.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. As an artist, that's you have to do that because nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to sort of, say, well, this is me. This is how I do my art. This is, if you want it, well, I mean, it was interesting actually. So the first time I actually showed my art in public, I had this huge bloke come up to me, and I'm not sure I can say what he said to me exactly, but it was basically, it's a load of rubbish. Let's go further than not just rubbish. It's like, oh, and actually, I thank that guy a lot of the time actually, because what he taught me was you're not going to please everybody all the time.
Yeah.
So find your tribe, find the people that do love what you do, and that's enough. That's
Yeah.
fine. So I honestly thank him, because he taught me a very valuable lesson very early on that people are going to say that sort of stuff to me, and you've just got to, be strong enough to deal with it.
Yeah. But also when you paint and you create these wonderful pieces, you're also putting that vulnerable part of you out there, aren't you?
Totally right.
And that exposure.
Yeah, yeah. So and it is part of that vulnerability, isn't it? So so I think the power that learning about hypnosis and the brain and how we can use the brain to help ourselves has been invaluable, in all areas of the work I do. So rather than just saying, well, I can't go and do that, what can I do instead to help? Yeah, so I was talking about, Restore Nature March, a few weeks ago in London. I couldn't go, I wasn't feeling well. So I spent the morning emailing politicians about, nature because we are one of the most nature deprived countries in the world. So rather than going, oh, I can't go, my brain's mindset now is, well, what can I do instead to help?
Yeah.
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 So we can all make that little change, rather than just accepting what's happening to us. When we learn those processes and learn, the ways that we can do that with our brains, we can then turn things around and make our lives better, which is ultimately, as hypnotherapists, that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? Make
Yeah.
people's lives better for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really exciting. Like, so retreats are in the future. Where
Yeah.
do you want to map your life for the future?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So I was talking about a book earlier. So what have I got sat on my desk right now? So you're seeing the drafts of my book. So here we have a J, and the little J's got a little story by the side of him, and he's got a little thing. So I have a deadline for this book. So I need to do this. And then being a creative person and being a hypnotherapist, going, well, what next? So I've actually got lots of ideas for more of these little books.
Yeah.
So they're really about sort of conversations, I suppose, between with children, with humans. So the little stories are sort of anecdotal sort of metaphors for how we can help our mental health. And yeah, so I'm quite excited about doing some more of these if I get a chance and if it's successful, because people might not like it. Who knows? I don't mind if they don't. They don't. It's fine. And then retreats, yeah. So we're trying to move to Somerset because my family are from Somerset. So I want to have this sort of lovely place that I can, just give people a space to breathe. If they want to talk to me, that's fine. If they don't, if they just want to sit in my studio and create art, that's fine. If they want to go for a walk in a beautiful place, then, it's yeah, it's something I've been thinking about for a while over lockdown, because all the lockdowns and all the COVID, and I've got to be careful with COVID. And it's like, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, about intensive conversations? And I think,
Yeah.
retreats, for maybe one, two, three people, that's going to give some of that intenseness that sometimes people need.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want it. If they don't want it, then it's a more gentle process. That's what we do as hypnotherapists, isn't it? We respond to our clients, and we help them in the best way that we can help them with their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's,
really exciting. Whereabouts in Somerset are you going to go?
well, we're hoping to sort of move to the sort of Avalon Marshes area. So it basically the levels, I suppose, villages around the levels. I want to be out of the city, not that where I live is particularly city-ish, but it is in the city. Yeah, I want to get, my husband's retired, so my son's training to be a blacksmith.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I was a bit left field, that was. I know. It's like, really? Okay. But we did everything we could, to facilitate him because I know how important it is, so I'm very good at doing that. This summer, he wants to get him to learn to dive. So him and I and the dog are going down to Cornwall for, so he can learn to dive in the Cornish seas. Yeah, so I guess that's what, and also, just continuing painting, but also continue seeing clients because I love it. I love being a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
Really do. I'm so glad, not only for myself because it's been massive for me, but also for clients, and those clients that are going to see in the future, like you. It's exciting, isn't it? Knowing that you can help people.
Yeah. And just to make a little difference, it is all about small things. Like life's all about small things and just,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. That's one of my favorite phrases, making a difference.
yeah. Yeah. And it's that it's even things like, what we say to somebody else. You were told by a teacher that you couldn't paint, and here you are painting and like acing it, doing a book, all of those things. And just that our words are so powerful, aren't they?
Yeah, and I hear that a lot from people who say, "Oh yeah, my teacher told me I was rubbish." And they come to, the workshops I do, and you think, and they're rubbish because, like me, I didn't want to paint an apple. I can't paint an apple that looks like an apple. I really can't. Honestly, I really can't. I'm not interested in painting an apple that looks like an apple. And what I'm interested in is getting stuff out of my head that I can imagine. And of course, as hypnotherapists, we do all that sort of reframing, don't we? Get people to imagine what their life can be like. And so for me, it's picking up all the energy and just letting it flow through me into a colourful piece of art.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating process. I love it. I love combining all the things I do, the nature, the art, and all the neuroscience, the hypnotherapy, the trance when you're in flow. Yeah, it's just a lovely place to be.
And I think that's a good part to end. A lovely place to be.
It is, isn't it? I mean, you understand what I'm talking about, do you? And it's just hope more people get to find out about hypnotherapy and what it can do for them, because it's just amazing.
Oh, and to give it a go, and to give it a go, and to choose the right person, it's
That's the
part
important
of
thing, isn't
it,
it?
isn't it? Yeah, and recognizing that some therapists we stay with because we don't know that we can change,
Mm.
like, and to find somebody that we resonate with, it cuts out a lot of the stuff at the start.
It does. Yeah, it does. That's the most important thing. Whenever I speak to anybody, get on with your therapist. That's the most important thing. If I'm not that person, go and find somebody
Right.
else.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
brilliant.
actually, it works both ways, doesn't it? We need to get on with them as well to do what our magic.
Well, this is it, but I mean, it's our job, isn't it? It's our job, and it's our, I love my clients, love them because that's part of my job to love them. And I think that there are people that won't feel comfortable or won't want that, and that's okay. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. I know from talking, obviously we've talked a little bit before we recorded this, how passionate you are about hypnotherapy. And I love that passion. I love to see that passion, actually. But some people find that a little bit too much. And if it's too much for them, go and find somebody who's a little bit dialed down.
A little bit gentler. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm like, let's roll, let's things up, let's go.
Let's get on with it. Yes.
I think there's elements where we are cut from the same cloth, and it's the activist, isn't it? Like that's that part. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
It's been lovely talking to you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this morning. It's been great.
Thank you ever so much for your time and your inspiration and your wonderful art.
Thank you.